this video, I'm going to be telling about every single fighting style in Bloxwood and a full guide on how to master them. Okay, so the very first fighting style we got here is the combat fighting style, and every single player gets this fighting style when they join the game, no matter what race you are. And it's probably the weakest and least common fighting style in the whole game, but keep in mind when you switch from this fighting style, you can never ever get it back. So I guess that makes it kind of rare for high level players, not really sure though. So the very first ability is called Quick Tackle, and this has a 1 mastery requirement. And for this one, you basically just dash forward and slam into your enemy with a bunch of force and send them flying in the direction. Next up, we got the Ground Smash. This is the X ability and it has a 20 mastery requirement. For this one, the user smashes into the floor, creating a small kind of wind tornado around himself, and it does a slight amount of knockback and damage to the player. And if the user has their melee stats completely maxed out, the Quick Tackle ability does 1,633 damage. The Ground Smash ability, however, does 1,961 damage. And the Mouse 1 ability does 1,050 damage. So that's probably the best one because you can use it without any cooldown. But it is going to be pretty hard to use your shots. Anyways, let's head over to the next fighting style. We got Dark Step, and this is actually the earliest fighting styles that was added to the game. I'm pretty sure it was there in the game when the game launched. This fighting style, unlike the combat style, is actually a proper fighting style, so you need to pay money, and the money that you need to pay for this fighting style is 150,000 belly. And the place you get this fighting style is by heading over to the Pirate Village Island in the first year and talking to the Dark Step teacher who's located between these two houses. And once you do that, you're going to be able to equip this fighting style whenever you want. The first ability of this fighting style is the Flying Kick ability, and for this one you can launch yourself forward with a kick, and it does a decent amount of damage but not a lot. Next up we got the Breakdance ability, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You kind of just breakdance with your feet and you deal damage to everything around you. Next up we got the Barrage ability, and this one is pretty cool because it actually locks your opponent in place, preventing them from moving. Next up we got the Overheat ability, and this is actually kind of a transformation, which is a pretty cool thing about this ability. Your feet literally set on fire, and every other ability you use actually does more damage. And also it looks way cooler. Like literally look at these effects, they're really amazing. So for the damage of these abilities, the M1 ability does 1,574, the Flying Kick ability does 2,448, the Breakdance ability does 2,742, the Barrage ability does 4,031, and the Overheat ability does 1,632. Very solid abilities indeed, but that is just for the first seed. Anyways, let's head over to the next fighting style, the Electric fighting style, and this costs a total of 500,000 belly, and you can buy it from an NPC called the Mad Scientist, who's located close to the bottom of Skyland. The first ability we got here is Stomp. For this one, you just jump straight into the air and back down into the floor, dealing a butt ton of damage. And this one has a 50 mastery requirement. Next up, we got the Electrical Tackle, and for this one, you kind of dash forward into your enemy, slamming into them and doing a bit of damage. Next up is the final ability. This one is called Electric Floor, and it has a 200 mastery requirement. And you create an electric floor right in front of you, doing a stun effect and a bit of damage. So then you can spam them with a bunch of other attacks directly after. Now onto the damage for the ability. The M1 click does 2,011 damage, the Z ability does 2,932 damage, the Electric Tackle does 3,427 damage, and the Electric Floor does 5,059 damage. A very solid fighting style for the price. Next ability we got here is the Water Kung Fu, and costs a total of 750,000 belly, and you buy it from this NPC located at the underwater city behind the secret wall. The first ability has a 70 mastery requirement, and for this one you basically just fire an air punch. It does a bunch of knockback and has pretty decent range. Next up is the Deadly Shower ability, and this has a 130 mastery requirement. For this you basically just shoot a bunch of water blobs towards your target. This one is pretty difficult to aim because it's not really AoE, so you need to be able to actually lock onto your target. Next up we got the C ability with a 250 mastery requirement, and this one is called Heavy Water Punch, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You dash straight into your enemy and you punch them. And this one can also kind of be used for movement if you play it right. Now on to the damage. The M1 ability does 2,114 damage, the Z ability does 2,875 damage, the X ability does 4,414 damage, and the C ability does 4,489 damage. But what makes this ability one of the best for grinding is the fact that it has no delay between its M1 attacks, and that's one of the biggest flaws of most of the other fighting styles in the game. Anyways, moving on from Water Kung Fu, we're heading over into the second sea, and the first fighting style you can buy here is the Dragon's Breath. And this one actually costs 1,500 fragments, which can be pretty difficult to get if you're a noob in the second sea. The first ability of this fighting style is called Dragon Rush, and it has a 100 mastery requirement. For this one, you dash straight forward into your enemy and deal a bunch of fire damage to them. Next is the Dragon's Flame. You just shoot forward a bunch of flames from your character, and it kind of spirals around them, dealing a bit of damage and a good amount of knockback. Next up is the Dragon Explosion, and this is similar to one of the abilities of the Bomb Fruit, because you literally charge up an explosion and then you just go boom, dealing a button of damage and knockback to everything around you. Now let's talk about the damage. The M1 ability does 2,332 damage. The Dragon Rush ability, which is the Z ability, does around 4,000 damage. Then we got the Dragon Flames, which do 3,500. Next up, we got the Dragon Explosion that does 4,500 damage. But I'm not gonna lie, this is the worst fighting style in the second C, so I don't really recommend buying this one.
Okay.
Next up, we got the Superhuman fighting style, and this is one of the most difficult fighting styles to get in the whole game because there's a bunch of stuff you need to do before you're eligible to get it. 300 mastery on Dark Step, Electric fighting style, on Water Kung Fu, and Dragon's Breath. And head over to the Snow Mountain and pay the martial arts teacher 3 million belly to get it. But I'm not really sure if it's worth it or not. The first ability is called Beast Owl Pounce with 110 mastery requirement. For this one, you dash straight into your enemy and you deal a butt ton of damage to them, and they actually cannot escape this at all if you hit them. So it's basically guaranteed damage. Next one is the Thunderclap. This has a 220 mastery requirement, and for this one, you kind of just spawn in a superhuman tornado around you, dealing a butt ton of damage to everything next to you. Next is the Conqueror's Gun with a 330 mastery requirement. For this one, you dash straight into your enemy and instantly deal a butt ton of damage to them, pushing them away. Just wait till you see the damage. The M1 Click does 2,477 damage, the Z ability does 4,700, the Thunderclap does 4,000, and the Conqueror's Gun does 4,400. And the best thing about this fighting style is that it has slower recharges than others, so you can literally spam your abilities. Moving on, we got the Dead Step fighting style, and the way you get this is by upgrading your Dark Step. And to upgrade your Dark Step fighting style, you must have a mastery of at least 400 on it, and also the library key, which you get from defeating the Awakened Ice Admiral. And on top of that, you have to pay the NPC 2,500,000 belly as well as 5,000 fragments. But this one, just like the previous version of this fighting style, has 4 different abilities. First up, we got the Rocket Kick. Instead of showing the trajectory of where you dash, you just dash straight into your enemy, and it looks pretty cool. Next up, we got the Wind Bullet, and this is the X ability with a 200 mastery requirement. For this one, you just kind of shoot a Wind Bullet. Very self-explanatory in it, and it does a good amount of damage. Next up, we got the Vermilion Drill, and this is an ability that locks your opponent in place so they cannot escape the shots from this. The only way to do that is by Ken tricking. That's really hard to do. Next up is the Maximum Overheat, and this is the transformation for this fighting style. Exactly the same as the one before. You just set your feet on fire, which increases the damage for all your attacks. And overall, this is a very solid fighting style. Moving on from Dead Step, we got Sharkman Karate, and in my opinion, this is the best fighting style for farming in the whole game. And the reason for that is because it has the buffs of Water Kung Fu from before, which is the no delay between M1 attacks. But the difference between that one and this is that this obviously does more damage since it's the upgraded version. Anyways, to upgrade it, it's kind of similar to the Dead Step. You need a 400 mastery on Water Kung Fu. You need the Water Key, which you get from defeating an NPC on the second sea, and you need to find an NPC called Dyrock the Sharkman and pay him 2,500,000 belly with 5,000 fragments. The first ability of this fighting style is 12 Water Pond, which I mainly use as a movement ability. It just dashes you forward with a bunch of water splashes, and if there's an enemy in your way, it deals damage to them. Next up, we got the Pressure Vortex, and this is the X ability with a 200 mastery requirement. You just shoot forward a water vortex and it just grabs your enemy, dragging you along with them, dealing a butt ton of damage to them. Next up, we got the Great Sea Spear. For this one, you drag your enemy right next to you, and then you kind of hit them with a water Kamehameha and send them flying away. And for this fighting style, the M1 ability does 2,500 damage, the Z ability does 4,000, the X ability does 4,200, and the C ability does 4,400. But keep in mind, the best thing about this fighting style is the fact that there's no delay between the M1 attacks, so make sure you abuse that. And that's it, we're pretty much done with the second C. Now we're moving on to the third, and the first fighting style you can get here is the Electric Claw. It's an upgraded version of the electric fighting style, and you need to have a 400 mastery on your electric before you can get this. Once you do that, you can head over to the previous hero NPC who's located at the Floating Toad Island, and you have to do the quest from him, and once you complete that, you can buy the fighting style from him for 3 million belly as well as 5,000 fragments. The first ability is the Z ability with 110 mastery requirement, and it's called Electric Rampage. For this one, you just start slashing your enemy with a bunch of huge electric claws. Pretty cool first ability. Next up, we got Lightning Thrust, and for this one, you charge up yourself and then dash straight into your enemy with a butt ton of lightning. Next up is Thunderclap and Flash, and this ability is probably the best looking one by far. You kind of dash around your enemy and then send them flying straight into the sky, and you deal a butt ton of damage to them. Overall, a very solid ability, but when it comes to grinding, I still think Sharkman Karate definitely beats it. Moving on from that, we got the Dragon Talon ability, and this is an upgraded version of the Dragon's Breath fighting style. You need a 400 mastery on Dragon's Breath to get this, as well as an item called the Fire Essence. Once you do that, you have to enter an NPC called Usopp, who's located at the big gear to the right pole on the Haunted Castle. Once you meet the requirements, just pay him 3 million belly as well as 5,000 fragments, and boom, you've learned the fighting style, and you can equip it from him at any time. The first ability from this fighting style is called Talon Lighter with 125 mastery requirement. This one, you dash straight into your enemy and you just charge up a flame and you just punch your enemy, dealing a butt ton of damage to them. It also sends them flying. Next up, we got Ember Annihilation with a 250 mastery requirement. This one, you charge up a huge firebolt and you just shoot it towards your enemy. Next up is the C ability, and this one is called Infernal Vortex. You just kind of charge up a fire tornado and then you just unleash it on your opponent and everything around you, dealing a butt ton of damage to everything there. And this is probably the best looking one from this fighting style. The M1 ability for this does 2,700 damage. The Talon Lighter does 4,700. The Ember Annihilation does 4,800 damage. And the Infernal Vortex does 5,300. Very solid fighting style. Moving on from that, we got probably the hardest fighting style to get in the whole game, and that is God Human. You thought getting Superhuman was hard? Just wait till you hear the requirements of this. To get this, you need your Superhuman at a 400 mastery, Dead Step, Electric Climb, Sharkman Karate, and Dragon Talon both at a 400 mastery. And keep in mind, to get each one of these abilities, you need the previous ones at a 300 mastery, so this is just going to be very tedious. You need a total of 5 million belly and 5,000 fragments. And that's not it, you also need 10 Dragon Scales, 20 Fish Bones, 10 Shard, and 20 Magma Ore. And I don't really recommend getting this fighting style until you finish the game because it's just a huge waste of time. The first ability of this fighting style is called Soaring Beast with a 125 mastery requirement, and it does a lot of damage. You dash straight into your enemy, you lock them in place, and just punch them a butt ton of times. Next up is the X ability, and this one is called Heaven and Earth. And this ability has two different versions. For the first one, you shoot a huge bolt of charged energy, and for the other one, you basically just do damage to everything around you with the invisible tornado. Next is the C ability, and this is called Sixth Realm Gun. You just dash straight into your enemy, and you can actually charge this one up, and the more you charge it, the more damage it does. Just wait till you hear the damage on this fighting style. The M1 click does 2,600 damage. The Soaring Beast ability can do up to 5,400 damage. The X ability does up to 6,300 damage, and the C ability does up to 5,800. Damn, it really is the best fighting style in the whole game. But that's not it. We have a sort of new fighting style that was added in update 20, and this is called Sanguine Art. And the requirements for this is a Leviathan Heart, and everyone knows that's incredibly difficult to get. Once you get that, you also need to have 5 million belly as well as 5,000 fragments. And then you can head over to an NPC called Shafi. You also need 2 Dark Fragments, Demon Wisp, and Vampire Fangs. And once you do that, boom, you get the Sanguine Art fighting style. The first official ability is the Z ability, and it's called Bloodbane Drain with a 125 mastery requirement. You dash straight into your enemy and you just hit them with a bunch of red and black ore, and this move deals 20% of the user's health when hit, which is pretty cool. Next up, we got the Scarlet Tear. This is the X ability with a 250 mastery requirement. You just shoot a huge claw made out of red and pink energy, and it does a button of knockback and damage. And this is probably the best looking ability in this fighting style. Next up, we got the C ability Devourer of Worlds with a 350 mastery requirement. And this actually has two different versions. For the first one, you shoot out a bunch of orbs into the sky, and they all attract your enemy, dealing a butt ton of damage. For the next one, you shoot out a massive black and red orb into the sky, and it just gravitates straight to your enemy and does a butt ton of damage to them. Make sure you hit that shot though. And the damage for this is really crazy, but not better than God Human. The M1 does 2,300 damage, the Bloodbane Drain does 4,700 damage, the Scarlet Tear does 3,500 to 4,200 depending on the amount of projectiles that hit. Then we got the Devourer of Worlds, which does 1,600 to 4,400 damage. And if you actually miss this ability, it still does damage. Overall, a very solid fighting style.